Awesome Rider Wiki.
Hey YouTube, Awesome Rider here, and welcome to my series review for Kaito Sentai Lupinranger versus Keisatsu Sentai Patranger. So it's been quite the year, an interesting year to be sure. This was a very innovative Sentai, our first ever Versus Sentai series. You know, we've obviously had the Versus movies, but with two separate teams. You know, it was interesting because we had 2 years that were kind of experimental. We had this year and then last year with the Ton of Rangers series, Q-Ranger. It was definitely a mixed bag. I'll say this right off the bat, I mostly did enjoy it. I definitely had problems with it, some big problems with it that mainly stemmed from, I think there was a lot of potential that wasn't fulfilled. But let's dive right in, shall we? Just, I don't know why I did that. Cut that out in editing. You probably won't. Damn it, future me. I hate you. So does past me. Anyway, I'm just nonsense in this review already. Anyway, so plot. There wasn't very much, to be honest. And by that I mean like a core serialized driving story. This guy isn't facing right, it's bothering me. There we go. Look at the camera, guy. This is like a, I don't think they ever did this formation. I just thought it looked cool because I like this helmet. Anyway, that's not about the review. So, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, the plot. So, there was basically just a few core bullet points, which was stop the Ganglers, which is the Patrangers' core motivation. The Lupinrangers getting their relatives back from Zamigo, / getting the Lupin collection for that. And then you had a bit of stuff with the Ganglers, and like taking the throne of lead Gangler, and then some Noel stuff. But it was mainly just, honestly, boiled down to stop the Ganglers, get the people back. I mean, those other things were intermingled with it, but there wasn't a ton, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. There have been Sentai that are more serialized-ish. Sentai always has a lot of filler. You know, even the most serialized Sentai will have decent chunks of filler. That's just part of its DNA. I accept that. But there has been Sentai that have been more story-focused, some that have been more episodic. This was definitely a more episodic one. And like I said, that's not a bad thing. I just don't think it was entirely handled well. Mostly. It made you feel like you weren't making any progress. Multiple times in the series, I felt like simultaneously we had been watching it a while, and also like it had just started. Like I remember being somewhere, I think it was in the 20s, 30s, when I was thinking, oh, I wonder when this is gonna happen, but we just started, and I'm like, oh, we're on like 27? And there was like times I checked like, well, where were we in Q-Ranger right now when like all of nothing was happening? And we were like in the middle of an arc with Evil Naga, and they traveled to the past, and there was like 3 different major storylines going on. And I'm like, wow, we're really going nowhere, aren't we? But again, that's the nature of having different series, different styles. But I think that they could have been better about doing more little things, like giving the characters more individual little arcs, because some Sentai that have been more episodic will compensate for that by giving each Ranger their own arc. 2 examples I can think of good ones that were episodic was Deca Ranger. I thought was pretty solid in terms of being more episodic, but feeling like we were making progress. Bokenger 2, because we had different factions, and then most of the Rangers had their own individual stories relating to something. Die Ranger did that a bit as well, although they did have some serialized stuff going on. But that's how you do it, is instead of having, you know, from plot to plot serialized stuff, you have little mini arcs about every Ranger. So it makes you feel like you're making progress, and you learn more about them. And you know, obviously a big plot point too was like the Patrangers finding out about the Lupinranger's identity. And that was something it's really funny to reflect on now, that in the early reviews, and even in the early days when we just got pictures, I was honestly concerned that they were going to out them too quickly. Like, we would have them knowing who they are like episode 11, and then we would do Kumbaya, because Sentai will often go that cheesy route and just like, everyone get along, just immediately. And I was like worried. I'm like, this is such a cool concept, I don't want to see that spoiled. And then it was like the exact opposite. They waited to the last 3 episodes. Now, I think it was good to wait, in a way, not all that much time, but wait a good amount of time to make the reveal worth it. You know, give the emotional build-up, which I think they did for the most part. But I think that they squandered a lot of storyline potential for what would happen after the Lupinrangers' identities were outed. If it were me, I would have built it up real good around 30, like somewhere in the 30s, 30, 35, and then, or maybe even the latest, like almost 40, like 39, 40, because there's a ton of story, just a wealth of story potential for different story plots and dynamics that you can have once they knew. You know, you can have Lupinrangers on the run, you could have them having to work together. It's just, there's so many things, there's like 100 ideas. Those 2, 98 others. No, you know what I mean, like, there was just a ton of stuff to be explored with that, with the dynamics in the field and out of the field, you know, could the Lupin Rangers be accepted? Would they always be on the run? Like, there was just a ton that I wanted to see out of that was basically just squandered, and I think that was a huge missed opportunity. And you know, I hope we do see a Versus series later down the line, because I'd like to see them try again. But we might not get one where it's like this cops and robbers dynamic, where you might not have that unique aspect of the reveal. And I think that waiting too long robbed us, no pun intended, of potential even more stories, because we got a good amount of stories if they don't know who we are. And that was kind of unfortunate. And the stuff with Zamigo too, like, obviously since that was the main plot, in a way it made sense that they stretched it out to the end, and I think they wrapped it up well, and it felt touching in the way with the relatives coming back and being the thieves too. But again, I would have wrapped that up earlier, because then you get to explore what do the Lupins do now. I mean, we established at the end of the series they're still going to hunt after the collection, so you could have done that. But we could explore how their goals shift, and that's going to tie into some character stuff I'm going to talk about too. But I think it was a mistake to stretch that out for that reason. And also, Zamigo's appearances ended up being so few and far between, it really lost the momentum. Like, I remember the first dozen or so episodes did a pretty good job of always planting a seed of whatever mysteries were going, but then that just kind of slowed down over time. And then the stuff with the villains too, like, I felt like that idea of somebody trying to take the throne of like head gangler was a really cool one, and that was never fully explored. So I think that there's missed potential is the best way I could describe this series in terms of story, because again, there's some Sentais that are totally more episodic like this, that's more about the characters, and that's okay. You know, that might not be for everybody, but it's okay to do those. I'm not saying not to do those, but just I don't think they handle it as well as they could have. But I will say, I'm usually not someone that enjoys more episodic Sentai. I usually tend to like the more story-driven ones. I usually have a harder time getting through them. But I usually enjoyed most of the series. I mean, there would be episodes where I had problems with it and disappointments like I just talked about. But, I mean, there was a handful of episodes that I was like, I don't like this one. But, for the most part, there was very few weeks where I was fidgeting or being like, oh, I hate this. Like, because of the characters and the general, you know, vibe of the show, I mostly enjoyed it, which is a reason I kind of like the show, is because it was a rare episodic Sentai that I actually enjoyed. Okay, so to get to characters, I'm going to sort of talk about them individually, but as groups. You know, there's like Team Lupin, Team Pat. A lot of people complained that there was more focus on the Lupin Rangers. It's funny because early on I kind of dismissed it and gave it the benefit of the doubt because, and I did that in general with this series, sorry buddy, with this series, because it's kind of growing pains, just like with Kyuranger. It's the first time they're doing something like this, so I understand that there's going to be missteps. But then it became apparent over time the Lupins were favored because of merchandise. And again, that's fine. That's just the way the business works. But I feel like I could have balanced it better. But the Lupins did get more focus. They were my favorite, though. But that doesn't mean that I hated the Pat Rangers. There were some people that were like one team and then they hated the others. And I felt it was like unfair to resent the Lupin Rangers because they got more focus. Like, it wasn't the characters or actors' fault, it's just the nature of the business. And I honestly liked both teams for different reasons. In some ways, almost equally. But as a team, I did prefer the Lupins because from the first episode when they established their goal and their bond to bring back their loved ones, it immediately gave it a more personal connection, a more personal reason to root for them. And they showed the bond between the three of saying, you know, if any of us fall, the remainder will, you know, achieve the goal for us. And I thought that was a beautiful sentiment. And you could really see the way that they were bonded through the series, and that really wrapped up well when they said, you know, that thing about us falling is silly, we're going to do this all together. And I really could feel the connection between them and the drive for their goal, which is why I liked them better as a team, because I could root for them because I felt a personal connection to them, which is, you know, why I was Team Lupin. But I didn't like the Pat Rangers. I thought the Pat Rangers were better individual characters. I think they suffered from the fact that early on, the Lupin Rangers had such a personal goal that I could attach to it. But the Pat Rangers' goal was, we're cops, we're doing our jobs. I'm so sorry, buddy, I'm too animated. You know, so that wasn't really, like, sure, being a good person is great, but when I'm watching a show, the way that you get me to really believe and root for the good characters is I need to understand why, because that's why it'll be inspiring. Like, why are you doing this? I'm like, oh man, that's really inspiring and heroic, but just, I'm a cop, like, oh, cool, that's so inspiring. Like, that sounds bad the way I'm saying it, but you know what I mean? Like, it just took a while for us to get reasons why they were in the field. And even when we did, I'll be honest, they were kind of generic for their stories about why they were in there. And I felt that they could have used a more personal touch. I think it was wise to make the Pat Rangers' motivations different from the Lupins, but I still would have liked something more personal about their goals, maybe even relating to the ganglers that would make them more rootable. Not like I didn't root for them, but just that way you get some equal attachment on both sides. But like I said, I think they were better individual. Like, I can tell you more about the Pat Rangers individually. Like, something I liked about Keiichiro is he kind of started off as that generic do-gooder and, you know, always the, like, you damn thieves. But then over time, we got to see him evolve. And that's when he ended up becoming one of my favorite characters, because we got to see that he observed the Lupinrangers and, like, okay, they're not so bad, and I'm willing to miss this chance to catch them to save the city. Or once he found out about them, it wasn't like, oh, you're scum thieves. It was, I really wish that I had been a better cop so that you had felt like you could have come to me with this and not become a thief. And I think it was really great to show his evolution and that he was reasonable and like a genuine good person, and it wasn't all black and white, you know, and he realized that, and that's what I thought was great about him. And there was a nice story about him wanting to be a cop because it inspired a kid, and then he was trying to inspire that one kid, and that kid ended up being inspired by Sakuya, but, you know, he was still happy the goal was achieved. Tsukasa was actually probably my favorite individual ranger. I thought she was just really cool and kind of like badass, and I think she was the smartest of the group, which is what I enjoyed about her the most. I just talked about how Keiichiro evolved into that, but what I liked about Tsukasa is from the beginning, when she started to get suspicions, she always felt very balanced about it. She never felt like, you know, she was, you know, oh, those stupid thieves and they're just trash, and she was just very level-headed, I think is the good way to put it, and I really enjoyed her character, and I liked her story about, like, why she was inspired to be a cop a little bit better. And I kind of wish she had been more directly involved with the final discovery that they were the Lupinrangers, and I think there could have been more to be had there. Then you have Sakuya, who a lot of people didn't like early on. He kind of bugged me more later. I did kind of get annoyed with him by the end, like with his overreactions to the Lupinrangers being non-criminals. But his thing is that he was insecure, and he was always worried about not doing a good job, which makes him, you know, it stands out. I remember that about him. My main problem with him is that, this seems weird to say about a Pat Ranger, but I felt he got too much focus. Because Pat Ranger focused episodes were so few and far between, and then I felt like whenever we would get one, it kept being about him and his insecurities or his crush on Umika. And I'm like, okay, this is cool, we're getting a Pat Ranger focus episode, but can I learn about the other two now? So he was probably my least favorite character. Well, no, second least favorite. But there was parts I liked, but I wasn't too huge on him. Now let me just talk about the Lupins real quick individually before we get to Noel. The thing about the Lupins is, like I said, I like them as a unit, and I do remember them individually, but as I'm just talking about them, the Pat Rangers stood out more as individual characters where I can tell you more about them individually, whereas the Lupinrangers, in a way, just kind of all gelled together for me. Like, I feel like I'm not connected to them as much individually in telling you about them as much as I am about them as a group. Like, a lot of people called Kairi Marvelous Light, and I kind of get that. He was kind of that, like, you know, jerkish personality, not like suave, not even the right word, but just kind of the cool guy. The thing that I thought was more interesting about his character was something that came up during the arc with Lupin Magnum, when they mentioned that he had grown to like being a Lupin Ranger, a phantom thief, in his quest, and, you know, him to save his loved ones is an excuse to get into it, but he really found liking that. And obviously in the series finale, they still continue to be Lupin Rangers, but that's another thing I think they cut off too soon. If the identities had been outed or their loved ones had been brought back earlier, that would have been a really interesting arc to explore. Like, what if the Lupins hung up their capes for a minute? Like, you know they wouldn't for the whole series. Like, they'd be called back in for whatever reason to finish the show out. But it'd be interesting to explore the idea of what if they're like, we achieved our mission, capes done, but then Kairi's like, no, I like doing this. That, I thought, was a really cool little character beat that I don't think they ever touched on again after that. Maybe a little bit with his bond with Keiichiro, but yeah, that was a missed opportunity. Tomo, I think, was like the most stoic. The thing that I remember most about him is his dark past and how they kept bringing that up. And like, I felt he did get some character moments and stuff from early on, but I felt like over time he got the least attention. I felt like he felt the least memorable to me, so I don't have as much to say about him, and I'm not going to kind of struggle to think of things, but I liked him just fine. Umika was probably like the lightest of the Lupin Rangers in terms of like kind of having a friendly personality. And something, again, that I thought was interesting about her character, they brought it up a couple times, that she had dropped out of school, high school, to work at the restaurant and become a Lupin Ranger to achieve this. And again, I think that's something that, it was a neat aspect of her character. It kind of reminded me of the Go Busters, where you have characters like Ryuji, who had already established a semblance of a life and had to put it on hold for being a ranger. And I wish that would have been explored more with Umika. Explode mo for show. Like, that was something, again, that if they revealed it sooner and had a temporary coat hang up or helmet hang up, whatever, would have been interesting to explore, and I think there was missed opportunity there. I thought there was a cool beat about some of her backstory, about how her friend that she was trying to save always protected her when she was being bullied, and I felt she found her strength through becoming a Lupinranger. But my point is, through these individual go-overs, is I love the Lupinrangers as a group, and I do like them just individually. Like, I don't, but the Patrangers, I can tell you more about them individually. And there was aspects of each Lupinranger that I think could have been explored more so individually. And I think just talking about them now, all those characters could have made for some fantastic mini arcs that could have filled out the plot to make it feel less like we weren't making any progress. Now, let's talk about Noel, probably my least favorite character. I was mixed from the beginning. If any of you followed my earlier reviews, you know that I was a little bit annoyed we were doing gold and silver and the suits looked so similar and the concept of it, because I thought it would have been cooler to do black and white. Makes more sense, cops and robbers, right? And have it be somebody that's like, the suits are totally different, so he's doing like the 2 dates trope, and he's going between the two for a little bit, not forever, maybe like 10 episodes max. I thought that would have been cooler. Or something people have brought up, which I completely agree with, if we're gonna do a character like him, that they should maybe make him like Shurikenger from Hurricaneger, where you don't really ever know his identity, or you don't find out till the end, where he's just kind of a faceless ranger, and it's more about his presence and personality. Because that was something I did kind of like early about Noel. I found him kind of entertaining, and because there was so much like, oh my god, who's the Lupinrangers, and he just comes right out with it, being like basically an out and proud double agent, there was some entertaining aspects to that. And I think that he worked more as kind of that entertaining character with that aspect of being the known double agent. And if he would have just been a faceless ranger, I think that would have worked, because I think that they never really made Noel feel like he was a part of the cast. I never felt like he was really bonded with either team, because both teams, even after we had the episodes after his debut of like, oh, he's bonding with them, I never felt like, and they straight up said it, both teams basically said, we don't trust him, but we're going to use him, more or less, to paraphrase. And then you have that big arc where, oh, he betrayed us, and they tried to make it seem like there was a huge weight to it, but there wasn't, because it never felt like he was a part of either of the teams. He clearly favored the Lupins, and I just felt that they did a poor job of integrating him. And he said when the Lupinrangers were outed, like, I just wanted you to get along. That could have been a whole arc about him trying to actually bridge the gap between them, but all he did was sow mistrust between him and the teams themselves. And I think it was just a poor excuse for a character in a lot of ways, and it really frustrated me. And then you have that nonsense about him being an alien that the Ganglers overthrew. And his whole thing is that he wants to get Arsene Lupin back like the other Lupins want to get their loved ones back. And that could have been done easily without making him an alien. That felt completely needless. I think he was the biggest missed opportunity. And like, in fact, in the final episodes, when like the Lupinrangers are doing their pact again and he comes in, I'm like, why are you here? It doesn't feel right. And I was glad he wasn't with them for that, because he never felt in place anywhere. And I think he would have been better, like I said, as kind of a faceless ranger character that never really had a place, and just let the two teams of three exist on their own, or just do it better and make them more involved. I don't remember if it was established if he was involved with the police before any of this went down. I don't think he was, but I think that in this aspect it could have been more interesting if he had been a global police officer and then a loved one was attacked by Zamigo and then he became a thief, so you could have this cool arc about him being torn between his values as a cop before Zamigo and what he needs to do as a phantom thief after. There's just, I could go on, I could do like a whole video about like ideas for Noel. I just want to say missed opportunity. Side characters wise, so we got, let's talk really quickly about Hilltop and the robot guy whose name I'm forgetting, so it doesn't matter. The robot, I feel, just because being kind of the quirky robot, had a little bit of a presence, but I think Hilltop was the most wasted character. Like, I was actually really looking forward to see what they did with his character and like how he might be involved in different dynamics with the team, but he honestly just sat behind the desk and gave orders, and I was really disappointed how little he was used. He was mostly just used for Eddie Murphy jokes. Then you have Kogura, who they had a lot of build-up, I felt, early on about him being kind of shady, which made sense, because like the Phantom Thieves, everything's kind of shady. And then that basically ended up amounting to him being an alien like Noel. Same thing with Noel. Like when they introduced Noel, they're like, oh, they're in cahoots. There's something shady with them. There's stuff going on we don't know about. The Lupin collection might not work. That never amounted to anything other than them being aliens. And honestly, I didn't think it was going to be like Build, where they're like, oh no, he's the big bad the whole time. But I thought it could have been a lot more interesting about him somehow actually being shady, and Noel being shady, and the promise of the collection being shady. Just the word shady. Just throw some shade in there. I don't know how you use that right. No, but you know what I mean? Like, I think there was a lot of potential for some really cool spy-like stories there. And all that, especially early on, the super, like, I hate to use the word again, but shady vibe just amounted to, oh yeah, I'm an alien that's just basically a human. Like, oh, okay. So you're from KL35. Or like, I think they're humans. Anyway, so that was a missed opportunity. As far as the villains go, I really liked the designs. I liked the concept of them feeling more like street criminal monsters because they were like criminals with the safes. I liked the idea of the safes. But I felt like they didn't have much presence. I mentioned that there was that cool arc about like, or general story idea of like, you know, who's gonna take the guy's throne. And they did address that a couple times. They had a couple little stories about it, but I felt that should have been a bigger thing. And this is something I've been talking about for a while. And I don't think it's been since Tokyuger that I felt that the villain group has had a big presence. Like, maybe it's just me, but I feel like a lot more Sentai had series or stories where the villains felt like they had a real presence in the show. Like, they were also co-starring in it. They had their own characters, their own dynamics to themselves, to the Rangers. And there was that to a degree a bit with Zamigo, but other than just kind of being quirky, he didn't have much to him. And I missed that. I felt like they didn't have as much presence as I wanted. Like, things like the Zangak and the Dark Matter, they also suffered from not having a presence character-wise, but they did have at least that presence because they were invaded, so it did make you feel that looming presence a little bit. But, like, they just haven't had a real presence in the show, and I missed that. And that's... don't really have too much to say about them individually, and I wish I did, because, again, with a series like this, I think there was opportunity for stuff like that. Just to quickly gloss over the suits and stuff a little bit, I really love the suits a lot. I love both team suits. I think I favor the Lupins a little bit. I'm a sucker for the colored visors because that's kind of a rare thing. And I think that the capes are super cool, the way it's fashioned after a thief outfit. I love the Patranger suits too, though. I think the white secondary color looks really good, the way it's like after a cop uniform. And I like that the visors are like cop hats, and you can tell that, but also if you don't want to, it just looks kind of unique. I think they're great suits. Again, I wasn't too hot on doing gold silver again, but the Lupin Patron X really grew on me, especially Lupin X. I actually wound up really liking Silver's suit. I really liked the changer. I thought it was cool. It was pretty clear the trigger machines worked better with it. I liked the idea of the double change in a way of Lupin X, but I hated that his changer was the mecha. I mean, I don't mind that idea, but I feel like they should have spent more time designing it, because I hated that he kept having to have other people summon and use stuff for him. It felt weird, like something they didn't account for until they were already shooting. The mecha-wise, I was like middle road. Like, this wasn't like one of my absolute favorite years for mecha, but I wasn't like throwing them out the window. I tend to prefer the Lupinranger's Megazord formations. Like, I really love the helmet on this one. I quite liked Lupin Kaiser. But I ended up liking the trigger machines better individually, like just, you know, as vehicles. There was some I liked, like when they finally got their Siren Striker formation, I really liked that one. And I didn't dislike Pat Kaiser, but they were overall solid for me. Power-ups wise, I miss getting like full Ranger power-ups and not just armor, but the Victory Lupin X was okay. I've mentioned this numerous times before, but I think Keiichiro should have gotten the Siren Striker power-up. I get why they did it with Lupin X, because the Lupins were more popular, but I think after the debut, after you've made them toy sales, then you could have bounced it around a little bit. That would have been nice. But yeah, I think that pretty much covers it, because the series is basically just characters and story. I did want to mention really quickly before I do my final verdict, something I forgot to mention in my series review, or finale review, excuse me, that bugged me I didn't mention, was that they revealed in like the second to last episode that these lock the safes, and that didn't bother me so much as like certain logic leaps in Geo, but that could have been an interesting plot point to introduce earlier, and there was all kinds of little stuff like that. But it bothered me, I forgot to mention that, so I'm sorry. But, final verdict. Overall, Lupinranger versus Patranger was not perfect. tons of missed opportunities, tons of things I was disappointed in, but I still enjoyed it. I found it to be an enjoyable year of Sentai. I definitely think there could be fixes, but like I said, I was pleasantly surprised how much I enjoyed an episodic Sentai. I really enjoyed most of the characters, which was a good part of it. I think they did really good character work with the relationships between the different teams, and I think they could have been played out more with, like, they tried to do something with Tsukasa and Toma that I think they could have strengthened more. It felt like all of a sudden Sakuya was important to Umika, even though it seemed more like a one-sided crush. But I think the dynamic between Kairi and Keiichiro was done really well. And I think when they had character moments together, that was the series' strong suit. Like, I really did, when they would have a good character moment or a bonding scene between the characters or a team, I would feel that. And I think they did a really good job at that. So yeah, far from a perfect series, but I still had a pretty solid time with it this year. I wasn't pulling my hair out or, you know, being really mad. I would probably give the series overall a 7. Like I said, I would like to see them tackle this concept in the future, maybe in 3 years, maybe in 10 years, but I think the idea of a versus Sentai could still be really cool, and I think I'd like to see them learn from their mistakes and go out there and do another one at some point, because I think it was a cool concept. And to a degree, I was a little bit forgiving because it was growing pains, but there was definitely some things they still could have avoided. But anyway, thanks for putting up with my like 20-ish minute ramble about this. Until next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and climb the step and ring that bell to get notifications for all my Power Rangers, Toku news, and toy reviews. Dawson Rider, signing out.